Hello, and welcome, weary traveller, to sleep among the forgotten. Tonight, as the world outside hushes its many voices, we'll journey into the quiet whispers of the past. Find your most comfortable resting place, dim the lights, and let your breath slow. Allow the gentle currents of this story to carry you far from today's worries, into a place where forgotten melodies still linger in the air. If you find solace in these quiet moments, please consider subscribing and joining our little community of dreamers. Now, close your eyes and let the soft embrace of sleep carry you away as we begin. The year was 1863, and Florence, even then, was a city carved from dreams and draped in the golden light of a perpetually setting sun. My name is Marco, though few beyond the ragged children who sometimes tossed me a coin knew it. To the bustling crowds, I was merely the silhouette against a sun-drenched wall, the faint melody carried on the breeze. A street musician in 1860s Florence. An almost invisible thread woven into the rich tapestry of daily life. And I played for ghosts, not the spectral kind that haunt old castles, but the lingering presences of history, the echoes of lives lived within these ancient stones. My instrument was a battered mandolin, its polished wood worn smooth by countless hours of strumming, its strings humming with stories it had absorbed over years of whispered confessions and silent observations. Each morning, before the city truly awoke, while the first blush of dawn painted the Arno a pearlescent rose, I would find my spot. It was usually near the Ponte Vecchio, though not directly on it, for the vendors there were a boisterous lot, and my music, gentle and unassuming, would have been lost in their clamour. Instead, I preferred the quieter piazza that opened just beyond the bridge's southern end, a small, unassuming space bordered by buildings whose facades spoke of centuries of silence. The stones themselves felt alive to me, as I would settle onto my usual worn wooden stool, the cool morning air still holding the scent of damp earth and freshly baked bread. I'd run my fingers over the rough texture of the wall behind me. Each imperfection, each tiny crevice, felt like a miniature landscape, a testament to the passage of countless hands, countless lives. I imagined the hands that had laid these stones, the artisans who had shaped them, their calloused palms pressing mortar into place, their quiet breaths misting in the crisp air of a forgotten morning. They were the first ghosts I played for, the silent architects of this city. My day would begin not with a flourish, but with a series of quiet, almost meditative plucks of the mandolin strings. I'd tune it slowly, listening intently to each note, letting the vibrations hum through my fingertips and up into my arm. It was a ritual, a gentle awakening of the instrument and of myself. The sounds would drift out, soft as a sigh, into the still waking piazza. Sometimes a lone cat, sleek and black, would stretch languidly in a patch of sunlight, its eyes half closed, seemingly captivated by the delicate arpeggios. These were my first audience members, the small, unnoticed creatures of the city, and their calm presence was a balm. As the sun climbed higher, painting the ancient buildings in richer hues of ochre and sienna, the piazza would gradually stir to life. The rhythmic clip-clop of a horse-drawn cart would echo in the distance, followed by the cheerful chatter of market vendors setting up their stalls. The scent of roasted coffee would begin to mingle with the sweetness of ripe fruit and the earthy aroma of freshly turned soil from some nearby garden. These were the moments I cherished, the gentle crescendo of the city's awakening. My music would subtly shift, from the quiet introspection of the early morning to more lilting melodic tunes, like the unfolding of a flower petal by petal. I never played anything boisterous or demanding of attention. My repertoire consisted mainly of old folk songs, melodies passed down through generations, their origins lost in the mists of time. There were the simple, heartfelt laments of a shepherd, the sprightly dance tunes of a village festival, and the tender lullabies sung by mothers to their children. These were the songs that spoke of everyday joys and sorrows, of the enduring rhythms of life. They were the language of the forgotten, and I, too, was one of them. People would pass by, their footsteps a soft whisper on the cobblestones. Some would pause, just for a moment, their eyes distant, as if my music had unlocked a forgotten memory within them. A weary laundress, her basket overflowing with crisp white linens, might stop, a faint smile touching her lips before she continued on her way. A young artist, his sketchbook clutched in his hand, might linger, his gaze fixed on some unseen point beyond the piazza, perhaps envisioning the vibrant colors of a scene my music painted for him. These fleeting connections were precious, tiny sparks of recognition in a world that often overlooked those like me. I never looked directly at those who listened. My gaze would remain soft, unfocused, directed toward the ancient archway that led into a narrow alleyway. This alley, shadowed and cool even on the hottest days, felt like a portal to another time. I imagined the countless people who had walked its path, their footsteps echoing through the centuries. Merchants with their wares, lovers stealing a moment, children chasing pigeons, their laughter, their sighs, their dreams still seemed to hang in the air, a faint, almost imperceptible hum. These were the ghosts of daily life, the ordinary souls whose stories were written not in grand monuments, but in the worn stones of the city. Sometimes a child would approach, drawn by the gentle notes. Their eyes, wide with curiosity, would fix on my mandolin, then on my face. They rarely spoke, just stood there, absorbed, their small bodies swaying almost imperceptibly to the rhythm. I would often play a particularly simple, joyful tune for them, a little melody that felt like sunshine. And when they finally, reluctantly skipped away, their small hands clutching a few copper coins their mothers had given them, I would feel a warmth spread through me, a quiet satisfaction that my music had brought a moment of simple happiness. The mid-morning sun would climb higher, bathing the piazza in a warm golden glow. The air would grow thick with the scent of blossoming jasmine from a nearby courtyard, mingling with the ever-present aroma of coffee and the sweet, yeasty smell of fresh bread. The sounds of the city would grow more pronounced. The distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the cheerful cries of children playing in a hidden courtyard, the murmur of conversations from the nearby shops. My music would become part of this symphony, a gentle counterpoint to the city's vibrant hum. I felt a deep connection to the history that surrounded me. Each note I played was an offering, a small homage to the countless lives that had unfolded within these ancient walls. I imagined the poets who had wandered these streets, their minds ablaze with verses, their hearts stirred by the beauty of Florence. I imagined the artists, their hands stained with paint, their eyes alight with inspiration, capturing the fleeting moments of light and shadow on canvas. I imagined the ordinary men and women going about their daily lives, their hopes and dreams woven into the very fabric of the city. They were the true audience for my music, the silent listeners who inhabited the air around me. There was a particular melody I often played in the late morning, a slow, melancholic tune that felt like a gentle farewell. It spoke of departure, of journeys taken, of the quiet sadness that accompanies the passage of time. as the first tourists, loud and curious, would begin to gather near the Ponte Vecchio, their voices a jarring contrast to the city's gentle rhythm, I would often play this song. It was my way of acknowledging the inevitable changes, the constant flux of life. Even then, the city was becoming a destination, a place to be seen, rather than simply lived in. And I, the street musician, was a quiet witness to this transformation. I rarely spoke. Words felt clumsy, inadequate, compared to the eloquence of music. My mandolin was my voice, its melodies carrying the weight of unspoken thoughts, the echoes of forgotten emotions. It was a language understood by the heart, a language that transcended the barriers of time and circumstance. And in the quiet moments between songs, when the only sound was the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze, I would feel a profound sense of peace, a quiet contentment in simply being, in simply playing. The world might have forgotten me, but I remembered the world. I remembered the way the light fell on the ancient stones, the way the Arno flowed, silvery and serene, beneath the bridges. I remembered the laughter of children, the murmur of conversations, the scent of jasmine and freshly baked bread. These were the details, the small, exquisite moments that made life rich and full. And through my music, I hoped to capture a fleeting glimpse of this beauty, to offer a quiet gift to anyone who cared to listen, even if those listeners were merely the silent, watchful ghosts of Florence. The day stretched before me, a long, quiet canvas, waiting to be painted with the soft hues of forgotten melodies. As the morning deepened into a languid afternoon, the character of the piazza subtly shifted. The frantic energy of the market vendors, now largely settled into their rhythms, softened into a contented hum. The air grew warmer, carrying with it the baked earth scent of old stone heated by the sun, mingled with the faint, sweet perfume of blossoming roses from a nearby courtyard. My music too adapted, becoming less of an awakening and more of a gentle conversation with the light and shadow that played across the ancient buildings. The sunlight, once a bold, direct gaze, began to slant, creating long, dancing shadows that stretched and contracted across the cobblestones. I would watch them, mesmerized, as if they were silent dancers performing an age-old ballet. A solitary pigeon might strut through a patch of light, its iridescent feathers shimmering before disappearing into the cool embrace of a shadow. The intricate carvings on the archways would suddenly gain new depth, their details highlighted by the sharp angles of the sun. This interplay of light and dark felt profoundly beautiful, a constant reminder of the world's quiet artistry. During these hours, the crowds thinned somewhat. The early morning rush of workers and market-goers had subsided, and the tourists, having seen the major sights, were likely seeking the shade of a cool trattoria for their midday meal. This was my favorite time to play, for the air felt lighter, more breathable, and the city seemed to settle into a peaceful slumber. My melodies would become softer still, almost whispers, like secrets shared only with the sunbeams and the ancient stones. I might play a slow, meandering tune that mirrored the lazy drift of clouds across the impossibly blue sky, or a gentle, repetitive melody that felt like the steady rhythm of a beating heart. I remember one afternoon, a very old woman, her face a roadmap of wrinkles, paused near my stool. She didn't look at me directly, but her gaze was fixed on the distant hills, hazy in the summer heat. My mandolin was weaving a tune that felt as old as she looked, a melody that spoke of timelessness and endurance. She stayed for what felt like an eternity, her shoulders slightly stooped, her gnarled hands clasped in front of her. I never knew what memories my music stirred within her, but I could feel a profound sense of quiet contentment emanating from her. When she finally moved on, her footsteps barely a whisper, I felt as though I'd shared a moment of deep understanding with one of Florence's quietest, most enduring spirits. She was a ghost too, in a way, a living echo of generations past. Sometimes a breeze would rustle through the sparse leaves of the small olive tree in the corner of the piazza, carrying with it the faint scent of drying laundry from a high balcony, the soft flapping of linen in the wind, the gentle creak of the clothesline. These simple sounds would weave themselves into my music, becoming an unwritten part of the score. I played not just with my hands, but with my senses, absorbing the atmosphere of the city and letting it flow through me, emerging as sound. My own needs during these long days were simple. A small, crumpled piece of bread, perhaps a piece of cheese gifted by a kind vendor, sustained me. Hunger was a familiar companion, but it was rarely a demanding one. The music itself was sustenance, filling me in ways that food never could. It nourished my spirit, keeping the quiet flame of my being alive. I found immense wealth not in coins, but in the fleeting beauty of a perfect chord, the resonant echo of a note against an ancient wall, the quiet understanding that passed between my music and the soul of the city. I often thought of the craftsman who had toiled in this very piazza centuries ago, perhaps a stonemason, his brow furrowed in concentration, shaping a block of marble, or a painter carefully mixing pigments, his eyes narrowed against the glare, envisioning a fresco for a grand palazzo. Their hands had shaped this city, their breaths had mingled with this very air. And now, my humble music, played on a simple mandolin, was another layer, another subtle imprint on the timeless tapestry of Florence. It felt like a small, quiet act of communion with those forgotten hands, a way of keeping their spirit alive in the soft vibrations of the strings. The afternoon sun would begin its slow descent, its light deepening from gold to amber, then to a rich, burnished copper. The shadows would lengthen further, becoming vast, sprawling shapes that engulfed entire sections of the piazza. The air would begin to cool, carrying a hint of the evening's freshness. This transition was particularly beautiful, a slow, graceful waltz of light and dark. My music would follow suit, becoming more contemplative, more reflective. I would play melodies that felt like the lingering warmth of the day, gentle farewells to the light before the arrival of the stars. The sounds of the city would shift once more. The midday quiet would give way to the gentle murmur of people returning from their work, their conversations softer, more subdued than the morning's chatter. The clinking of dishes from a nearby restaurant would begin to emerge, along with the rich, inviting aroma of simmering sauces. Florence, in these late afternoon hours, felt like a grand old lady settling in for a peaceful evening, her day's errands done, ready to embrace the quiet comfort of dusk. I rarely paid attention to the number of coins in my small, worn cap. It was enough to have enough for a small meal, a place to lay my head, and a few strings for my mandolin. My true currency was the feeling of the sun on my face, the scent of the city, the whisper of the wind through the arches, and the profound, almost spiritual connection I felt to the history that breathed all around me. I was a part of it, a tiny, forgotten note in the grand, unending symphony of time. As the first stars began to prick the darkening canvas of the sky, I would play my final, most ethereal pieces. These were the melodies that felt like dreams, like the hushed secrets of the night. They were for the ancient spirits of Florence, for the ghosts who truly walked these streets when the world grew quiet. I imagined them listening, these long-gone souls, the Roman centurion, the Renaissance artist, the medieval merchant, their presence a silent, profound audience to my humble song. It was a beautiful, almost sacred exchange, a timeless dialogue between the living and the long-departed. The mandolin would sigh its last notes, the echoes clinging to the stones before fading into the vast silent embrace of the Florentine night. As the last sliver of the sun dipped below the distant Tuscan hills, painting the sky in fiery streaks of orange and violet, a transformation would begin in Florence. The vibrant energy of the day, with its hurried footsteps and bustling voices, would gradually recede, replaced by a softer, more introspective hum. This was the hour of twilight, a magical time when the city seemed to hold its breath, caught between the light of the day and the deep velvet of night. My mandolin, attuned to these subtle shifts, would echo this quiet solemnity. The cool air that began to seep into the piazza carried with it new scents. The earthy aroma of damp stone, newly released from the day's heat, the faint sweet scent of night-blooming jasmine from hidden gardens, and the rich, comforting smell of wood smoke from distant chimneys as families prepared their evening meals. These aromas, subtle yet profound, wove themselves into the fabric of my music, making each note feel heavier, more resonant. I would close my eyes sometimes, letting these scents fill me, imagining the countless evenings that had unfolded in this very spot, each one carrying its own unique tapestry of smells and sounds. The streetlights, few and far between in those days, would flicker to life, casting pools of warm orange light that shimmered on the wet cobblestones if a recent shower had passed. These were not the harsh uniform lights of later years, but gentle beacons that seemed to dance with the shadows, illuminating fragments of the ancient buildings and leaving the rest shrouded in mystery. In these moments, Florence felt less like a city and more like a living, breathing entity, its ancient heart beating slowly in the deepening gloom. This was when the true ghost began to emerge, not just the echoes in the stones, but the presences I played for. Not spirits with visible forms, but the lingering energy of all who had walked these paths before. As the chatter of the city softened, I could almost hear the whispers of forgotten conversations, the rustle of long vanished silks, the faint echo of laughter from a time when these very walls were fresh. My music would become a bridge to them, a wordless invitation to listen, to remember. I often played melancholic, almost prayer-like melodies during these hours, pieces that spoke of yearning and remembrance, of the timeless flow of life and loss. A couple might stroll past, their hands intertwined, their voices hushed, their figures silhouetted against the fading light. They might pause for a moment, drawn by the gentle, almost invisible current of my music, before continuing on their way, their footsteps a soft whisper. I imagined them as reflections of lovers from centuries past, their stories replayed in the soft glow of the gaslights. Love, like the city itself, seemed eternal, a constantly renewing current flowing through the ages. The occasional clatter of a closing shop door, the distant bark of a dog, the gentle strumming of another musician far down a different street. These sounds would weave into the tapestry of the evening. They didn't interrupt my playing, but became part of the symphony of the fading day. I was but one voice in a chorus of timeless sounds, a single thread in a vast, intricate pattern. My hands, though often stiff from the day's playing, seemed to move with a life of their own during these twilight hours. The notes flowed effortlessly, as if the mandolin itself had absorbed the spirit of the city and was now speaking through me. I wasn't consciously choosing the melodies. They simply emerged, a natural outpouring of the atmosphere that enveloped me. It was a feeling of being utterly present, utterly connected to the moment, to the ancient pulse of Florence. I often thought of the quiet lives that unfolded behind the shuttered windows of the buildings around me. The families gathering for supper, the scholars bent over their books by lamplight, the old women telling stories to their grandchildren by the warmth of a dying fire. My music was a gentle backdrop to their lives, an unheard lullaby sung to the city itself. It was a humble role, yet it felt profoundly meaningful. To be a small part of the beautiful, everyday existence of Florence was enough. The air would grow cool, almost crisp, as the night deepened. The stars would begin to emerge in greater numbers, a sparkling canopy unfurling above the ancient roofs. The moon, if it was visible, would cast a silvery sheen on the Arno, turning its dark waters into a shimmering ribbon. It was a breathtaking sight, a reminder of the vastness of the universe beyond the narrow streets and towering campaniles. And in that vastness, my small music, a fragile echo of human experience, felt both insignificant and infinitely precious. I would play until the piazza was truly empty, save for the occasional solitary figure making their way home, their footsteps echoing loudly in the silence. The last melodies would be the slowest, the most lingering, like a final breath before sleep. They were for the night itself, for the deep quiet that settled over the city, for the ancient stones that held so many secrets within their silent hearts. It was a private concert for the past, a lullaby for the forgotten. When my fingers finally stilled, the silence that followed was not empty, but rich with the lingering vibrations of the music. It felt as if the air itself was still humming, carrying the faint echoes of the mandolin's song. I would gather my few belongings, the worn stool, the battered case, and slowly make my way to my humble sleeping place, usually a sheltered alcove or an abandoned doorway, where the cool stone offered a measure of comfort. Even in sleep, the melodies would often continue to play in my mind, a quiet concert performed for the dreams that visited me. Florence, my beautiful, timeless Florence, would lull me to sleep, her ancient breath a soft, comforting presence in the quiet darkness. The moon, if it graced the Florentine sky, was my silent companion in the deep hours of the night. Its silver light would paint the ancient facades in shades of ghostly white and deep indigo, transforming the familiar piazza into a landscape of dreams. During these hours, after the last echoes of the day had faded, and even the distant sounds of the city had succumbed to sleep, the world felt vast and utterly still. It was a silence so profound you could almost hear the stars twinkling. My humble sleeping spot, often an alcove near a shadowed archway, offered a measure of shelter from the cool night air. The stone, still radiating a faint warmth from the day's sun, was a comforting presence beneath my thin blanket. I would lie there, not always sleeping, but simply listening to the quiet breath of the city, the Arno's gentle murmur, a constant, ancient presence, would drift in from afar, a timeless lullaby. Occasionally, a lone owl's hoot would pierce the stillness, a solitary voice in the vast silence, reminding me of the wildness that still existed just beyond the city's edges. In these deepest hours, my thoughts would often drift, not to the worries of tomorrow, but to the countless nights that had unfolded in this very spot. I imagined the Florentines of centuries past sleeping in their beds, their dreams woven into the fabric of the city. What did they dream of? Love, loss, triumph, despair. Did the ghost of a street musician ever wander into their dreams, playing a tune they couldn't quite place? It was a comforting thought, this shared tapestry of human experience across time. Sometimes a sudden soft rustle would break the silence, a mouse scurrying across the cobblestones, or the gentle descent of a single leaf from a high tree. These tiny sounds, magnified in the profound quiet, were like delicate brushstrokes on the canvas of the night. They reminded me of the hidden life that thrived even in the deepest hours, the small, unnoticed creatures moving about their secret ways under the cloak of darkness. I felt a profound sense of connection to the very ground beneath me. This earth had witnessed so much, the rise and fall of empires, the birth of masterpieces, the countless joys and sorrows of ordinary people. To sleep upon it, to feel its steady, ancient pulse, was a privilege. It was as if the stones themselves were whispering their stories to me, not in words, but in a language of vibrations and silent echoes. My mandolin, nestled securely beside me, seemed to hum faintly even in its stillness, holding the day's melodies within its wooden heart. I imagined the lingering vibrations of the last notes I had played, dissipating slowly into the cool night air, carried on the breeze to touch the distant corners of the city. Perhaps they reached the dreams of a weary artisan, or brushed against the window of a sleeping child, offering a moment of unexpected beauty. The quietude was not an absence, but a presence. It was the presence of history, of time itself, unfurling its endless scroll around me. It was the vast, dark canvas upon which the city's past and future were drawn. And I, a forgotten musician, was a tiny dot on that canvas, a fleeting moment in an eternal story. This thought brought a strange sense of comfort, a release from the burdens of individual existence. I was part of something much larger, much older than myself. As the hours passed, the stars would slowly begin their westward journey, their brilliant points of light steadily shifting across the velvet expanse. The air would grow colder, a crispness that hinted at the approaching dawn. A profound sense of peace would settle over me, a tranquility that came from being utterly alone in the heart of a sleeping city, surrounded by the silent witnesses of centuries. Just before the first faint hint of grey touched the eastern horizon, a profound stillness would descend. It was the deepest part of the night, the hour before awakening. The sounds of the world would cease entirely. Even the distant murmur of the Arno seemed to soften. In this absolute quiet, I felt most connected to the ghosts I played for. Their presence was almost palpable, a gentle, understanding silence that enveloped me. We were all together in this ancient sleeping city, bound by the common thread of existence, however fleeting. My eyes would finally drift closed, not out of weariness, but out of a deep contentment. Sleep, when it finally claimed me, was a gentle descent into the quietude I had spent the night embracing. Dreams, if they came, were often fragments of melodies, whispered conversations from long ago, or the play of light on ancient stone. I slept amongst the forgotten, and in that sleep, I too was forgotten, a fleeting part of Florence's timeless dream. Just as the deepest silence of night felt most profound, a subtle shift would begin in the eastern sky. A faint, almost imperceptible lightning, a softening of the inky blackness to a bruised purple, then to a delicate rose. This was the first blush of dawn, the earliest whisper of the new day. The air would grow crisper still, carrying with it the undeniable scent of morning. A clean, fresh aroma mingled with the promise of warmth to come. My eyes would flutter open, not suddenly, but gently, as if unpeeling themselves from a long, sweet dream. The familiar silhouettes of the buildings around me would begin to sharpen, their ancient outlines emerging from the diminishing darkness. The first faint chirping of a bird would break the profound stillness, a tentative, hopeful note, followed by another, and then another, until a small chorus of invisible feathered musicians welcomed the nascent light. I would stretch, feeling the cool ache in my limbs, a gentle reminder of the hard stone beneath me. This moment, before anyone else stirred, was sacred. It was a private communion with the awakening city. I'd watch the sky, captivated, as the colors deepened from rose to gold, the first rays of the sun touching the highest spires of the Duomo, setting them alight like beacons of hope. It was a sight I had witnessed countless times, yet it never failed to fill me with a quiet wonder. Each sunrise in Florence felt like a fresh beginning, a testament to the enduring beauty of life. The very first sounds of human activity were often the distant clip-clop of a lone horse-drawn cart, perhaps a baker delivering his fresh loaves, or a farmer bringing produce from the countryside. This rhythmic, almost hypnotic sound would signal the slow turning of the city's great wheel, preparing for another day. Soon, the aroma of freshly baked bread would waft into the piazza, warm and yeasty, a comforting scent that promised sustenance and the simple joys of daily life. I would carefully retrieve my mandolin, its wood cool to the touch after the night air. My fingers would brush against the strings, a silent greeting. Tuning it would be the first true act of my day, a delicate dance of sound, coaxing each string to hum with perfect harmony. The first notes I played in these early hours were always soft, almost hesitant, like a tentative greeting to the waking world. They were for the rising sun, for the sleepy pigeons beginning to stir on the rooftops, for the quiet breath of the city itself. Sometimes a lone figure might pass, a watchman ending his shift, or a young monk on his way to early prayers. They would move like shadows, their footsteps hushed, their presence barely disturbing the stillness. We were fellow guardians of the dawn, sharing a quiet, unspoken understanding of the beauty of these liminal moments. My music, though unheard by them, was a silent acknowledgement of their solitary journeys. The light would grow steadily, banishing the last vestiges of night from the narrow alleyways and shaded courtyards. The intricate details of the ancient facades would emerge more clearly. The worn carvings, the faded frescoes, the ironwork balconies draped with pots of geraniums. Each morning, it was as if Florence was slowly revealing herself anew, shedding the mysterious cloak of night to display her timeless beauty. The sounds of the city would begin to build, a gentle crescendo from silence to the full symphony of daily life. The distant murmur of voices, the clinking of keys as shops opened, the cheerful greetings exchanged between neighbors. These were the threads that wove together the tapestry of the waking city. My music would respond, becoming slightly more robust, more melodic, like a gentle invitation to the day. I felt a quiet gratitude for these mornings. To be a part of Florence's awakening, to offer my humble music as a soundtrack to its renewal, was a profound gift. I was not a grand maestro, nor a celebrated artist. I was simply Marco, the street musician, playing for the ghosts of a city I loved, a city that awoke each day with the promise of enduring beauty. The coins that might appear in my cap later in the day were an afterthought. The true reward was this quiet communion with the dawn, this dance of light and sound that marked the beginning of another day in 1860s Florence. The city was stirring, and so was I, ready to meet the new day with a song. As the morning progressed, the sun would climb steadily overhead, reaching its zenith around midday. The gentle warmth of dawn would give way to the full embrace of the Florentine summer heat, a golden blanket that settled over the city. The piazza, once quiet and contemplative, would now be bustling with the vibrant energy of the daily market. This was a symphony of sounds, colours, and aromas, and my music would become a quiet, steady current within its lively flow. The air would thicken with the mingled scents of ripe peaches and cherries, earthy root vegetables, fragrant cheeses, and the sharp, inviting aroma of cured meats. The calls of the vendors would echo through the space. Fresh figs, sweet as honey, or olives from the hills, signore. Their voices, boisterous and rhythmic, were like another form of music, a lively counterpoint to my own. I would sit, a quiet observer amidst this cheerful chaos, my mandolin weaving its delicate melodies through the robust tapestry of sound. Families would throng the piazza, mothers with their baskets slung over their arms, children darting through the crowds, their laughter like bright scattered jewels, the rustle of their skirts, the scuff of their shoes on the cobblestones, the murmur of their conversations. These were the vital sounds of life, the beating heart of Florence. My role was not to demand attention, but to offer a gentle backdrop, a subtle enhancement to the everyday magic unfolding around me. I often played more upbeat, lilting tunes during these hours, melodies that spoke of sunshine and simple joy, of the abundance of the earth. They were tunes that might make a weary shopper tap their foot almost imperceptibly, or bring a fleeting smile to the face of a child. I watched the faces that passed by, a kaleidoscope of expressions, weariness, wonder, anticipation, contentment. Each face held a story, a universe of experience, and my music was a quiet acknowledgement of them all. The shadows, which had been long and dancing in the morning, would now shrink beneath the intense overhead sun, offering little respite. I would often shift my position slightly, seeking the slender sliver of shade offered by a narrow column or a projecting cornice. The heat could be intense, but it was a familiar companion, a part of the Florentine summer experience. I'd feel the warmth seep into my bones, a deep, pervasive heat that was almost like a physical presence. My fingers would move steadily over the fretboard, a practice dance learned over years of dedicated playing. Sometimes, a particularly vibrant burst of laughter from a group of friends sharing a joke at a nearby stall would inspire a spontaneous flourish, a joyful cascade of notes that seemed to tumble out of my mandolin. These moments of improvisation were rare but cherished, a direct response to the living pulse of the city around me. I rarely interacted with the vendors beyond a polite nod or a shared glance. We were all part of the same intricate ecosystem of the piazza, each playing our own essential role. They provided sustenance for the body, and I, in my humble way, hoped to provide a whisper of sustenance for the soul. Their shouts and my melodies, though seemingly disparate, contributed to the same vibrant hum of daily Florentine life. The constant flow of people meant that new faces were always appearing and old ones disappearing. Yet there were familiar rhythms, familiar gestures. The way a woman would carefully examine a bunch of grapes, the way a child would tug on a parent's sleeve, pointing at a brightly colored toy. These small, everyday interactions were endlessly fascinating to observe. They spoke of the enduring patterns of human life, patterns that had played out in this very piazza for centuries. I thought of the forgotten market criers, their voices now just echoes in the stones. The medieval merchants hawking their silks and spices, The Renaissance artists selling their sketches. They were the ghosts of the midday market, their spirits lingering in the very air I breathed, and my music, a soft counterpoint to the modern clamour, was a quiet tribute to their enduring presence, a way of keeping their memory alive in the vibrant heart of Florence. The afternoon, with its persistent sun and ceaseless activity, felt like a timeless celebration of life, and I, the humble musician, was content to play my part. As the midday sun began its slow, inevitable descent from its highest point, the intensity of the heat would begin to soften. The light, no longer directly overhead, would slant across the piazza once more, painting the ancient buildings in softer, warmer tones. The shadows, which had been brief and sharp, would lengthen, stretching out like lazy limbs, reclaiming parts of the cobblestone square. This gradual decline of afternoon was a time of quiet transition, a gentle sigh before the evening's embrace. The market's fervent energy would also begin to wane. Vendors, having sold much of their wares, would start to pack up their stalls, their movements becoming more deliberate, less hurried. The vibrant tapestry of sounds would unravel slightly, the cheerful clamour replaced by a softer murmur, the occasional clatter of a closing crate, or the gentle swish of a broom sweeping away stray leaves and discarded fruit peels. My music, ever attuned to the city's mood, would become more subdued, more reflective, like a quiet companion to the fading day. I often played melodies during these hours that felt like quiet reflections, tunes that spoke of contentment and the satisfaction of a day well spent. There were gentle arpeggios that shimmered like the golden light on a distant rooftop, and slow, sustained notes that mirrored the long, drawn-out shadows. It was a time for contemplation, for simply existing in the beautiful, peaceful decline of the day. The scents in the air would shift again. The sharp freshness of morning, the rich abundance of midday, would now give way to the more subtle aromas of residual warmth, the lingering sweetness of fruit, and the faint, pleasant scent of dust stirred up by departing feet. These were the smells of a day settling down, of the city preparing for its evening rest. Fewer people would pass by now, and those who did often moved with a slower, more unhurried pace. A solitary figure might pause on a bench, lost in thought, watching the light play on the distant bell towers. A group of schoolchildren, released from their lessons, might skip through the piazza, their laughter echoing briefly before fading into the narrowing alleyways. These moments felt more intimate, more personal. I imagined the artists who might have sat in this very piazza centuries ago, perhaps sketching the same architectural lines I now watched, captivated by the same changing light. Their spirits, those quiet, observant souls, felt particularly close during these hours. I played for them, for their enduring artistic vision, for their love of this city that transcended time. My music was a silent dialogue with their unseen presence, a shared appreciation for Florence's timeless beauty. My fingers, though tired, would move with a gentle persistence. The mandolin felt like an extension of myself, a living entity that resonated with the city's ancient heartbeat. Each pluck, each strum, was a small act of devotion, a quiet offering to the soul of Florence. I never worried about the future or regretted the past. In these moments, there was only the present, the gentle decline of light, and the enduring comfort of my music. The shadows would continue to stretch, growing longer and deeper, beginning to merge and blur, transforming familiar shapes into soft, indistinct forms. The sun, a burning disk earlier, would now be a softened orb of gold, casting a long, final glow across the rooftops before slipping behind the distant hills. This was the magic hour, a liminal space where the boundaries between day and night, between the tangible and the ethereal, seemed to dissolve. I would often play melodies that felt like a quiet conversation, tunes that flowed smoothly without sharp edges or sudden changes. They were for contemplation, for gentle companionship, for the quiet unfolding of an evening in a city that seemed to breathe history. The notes would drift out, carried on the cool breeze, merging with the subtle rustle of leaves in the ancient trees and the distant ripple of the Arno. Sometimes a silhouette would pass, a man in a wide-brimmed hat, his step soft, or a woman with a shawl wrapped around her shoulders, her profile serene in the lamplight. They rarely stopped, but their presence was enough. They were the living continuum of Florence, the inheritors of the city's ancient spirit. I played for them, for their quiet moments of peace, for the simple beauty of their everyday lives unfolding against a backdrop of centuries. I thought of the forgotten gatherings that had taken place in this very piazza during countless evenings long ago. The grand balls, the impromptu dances, the quiet conversations of scholars and artists under the same moon. The laughter, the music, the whispered words. Their echoes felt almost palpable in the cool night air. My mandolin's notes, in their small way, were a continuation of that grand, unseen symphony, a quiet homage to the joy and camaraderie that had always filled this space. My hands, though growing weary from the day's constant motion, seemed to find a renewed purpose in the evening's tranquility. The mandolin felt lighter, its voice richer, as if it too was embracing the hushed beauty of the night. It was an effortless flow of music, a direct translation of the serene atmosphere into sound. There was a profound sense of rightness in it, a feeling of being exactly where I was meant to be, doing exactly what I was meant to do. The air would grow stiller as the hours deepened, the sounds of the city becoming more distinct, yet more distant. The clinking of glasses from a far-off osteria, the faint chime of a church bell marking the hour, the soft scurry of a cat across the cobblestones. Each sound was a single pearl on the string of the night. I would often play a particularly slow, tender melody during these deep evening hours, a lullaby not just for the city's inhabitants, but for the city itself. It was a song of quiet blessing, a wish for peaceful rest for all the souls, living and long departed, who called Florence their home. As the stars began to emerge in greater numbers, piercing the inky blackness with their brilliant points of light, I felt a deep, abiding connection to this timeless city, a silent participant in its eternal story. The evening was a gentle descent into slumber, and my music was its soft, accompanying breath. As the evening deepened into the true heart of night, the city's sounds would gradually recede, like waves pulling back from the shore. The distant hum of conversation would fade, the clinking of dishes would cease, and even the faint occasional chime of a far-off bell would become less frequent. This was the hour of profound quiet, a time when Florence seemed to hold its breath, entering a state of deep, ancient slumber. My spot in the piazza, once a vibrant hub, would become a sanctuary of stillness. The gas lamps, though still burning, would cast longer, more defined shadows, creating a patchwork of light and dark that felt both mysterious and comforting. The air would grow crisp and cool, carrying the pure, clean scent of night itself, mingled with the earthy aroma of old stone and the faint, sweet perfume of unseen flowers. During these hours, my mandolin would remain silent. This was not a time for playing, but for listening, listening to the quiet breath of the city, to the almost imperceptible rustle of leaves high in the trees, to the soft scurry of unseen creatures moving in the shadows. The most prominent sound would often be the steady, rhythmic murmur of the Arno, a constant, ancient voice that had flowed through Florence for millennia. It was a soothing, hypnotic sound, a lullaby whispered by time itself. I would often lie back, looking up at the vast expanse of the night sky. The stars, now unobscured by the city's glow, would appear in countless, brilliant pinpricks of light, a breathtaking canopy stretching infinitely above me. The moon, if present, would cast a soft, silvery glow on the rooftops, transforming the familiar architectural lines into ethereal, almost dreamlike silhouettes. It was a humbling sight, a reminder of the universe's immense scale and my own small, fleeting place within it. In this deep quiet, my mind would drift to the forgotten ones, not just the historical figures, but the countless ordinary souls who had lived and died in this city. The laughter that had once filled these streets, the tears that had stained these stones, the whispered hopes and fears that had been carried on these very breezes. Their presence felt almost palpable in the stillness, not as ghosts to be feared, but as a gentle, collective spirit, a timeless echo of humanity. I imagined them sleeping in their long, vanished beds, their dreams woven into the very fabric of Florence's nightly slumber. Perhaps my melodies, played during the day, had sometimes drifted into their waking hours, becoming a faint, pleasant memory. Now, in the profound silence of night, it was their turn to send their quiet echoes to me, a wordless conversation across the centuries. The stones beneath me, cool and unyielding, felt like a living history book. I ran my fingers over their worn surfaces, tracing the faint lines and imperfections, each one a testament to the passage of time, to the countless hands and feet that had touched them. They held secrets, stories, and the lingering energy of every life lived here. To be enveloped by this ancient presence was a profound comfort. Occasionally, a particularly lonely and distant sound would break the stillness, the faraway bark of a dog, or the soft chime of a clock from a tower I could not see. These sounds, amplified by the profound quiet, were like momentary disturbances on a perfectly smooth surface, only serving to highlight the vast encompassing silence that followed. This was the time of true rest, not just for my body, but for my soul. Without the need to play, to be present for others, I could simply be. I was Marco, the street musician, yes, but also just a human being, a small part of the grand, unending cycle of time in a city that had witnessed it all. The sense of belonging, not to any particular group or family, but to the very essence of Florence, was deeply comforting. As the hours drifted towards the earliest hints of dawn, the air would grow colder, a subtle chill that spoke of the night's deep embrace. The stars would slowly begin to dim, a sign that the sun was preparing its ascent once more. But for now, in this last stretch of true darkness, the quiet reigned supreme, a beautiful, profound silence that held all the forgotten whispers of Florence within its gentle heart. And I, nestled amidst the ancient stones, was deeply, serenely asleep, truly among the forgotten. As the deep quiet of the night began its slow retreat, the first, almost imperceptible breath of dawn would stir the sleeping city. A faint lightening in the eastern sky, a subtle shift from the inky black to a soft, ethereal grey, heralded the approaching morning. The air, still cool and crisp, carried the clean scent of damp earth and distant, awakening gardens. This was the hour of promise, the gentle turning of the great wheel of time towards a new day. My eyes would open naturally, without effort, accustomed to the subtle shifts of the Florentine sky. The ancient silhouettes of the buildings, which had been merged into one dark mass in the deepest night, would begin to define themselves once more, their familiar shapes emerging from the diminishing darkness. The very first sound was often the tentative chirp of a single bird, then another, a fragile chorus building gradually, a quiet celebration of the nascent light. I would stretch, feeling the stiffness in my limbs ease away with slow, deliberate movements. The worn stones beneath me, which had been my bed, felt like old friends, silent witnesses to countless dawns. I take a deep breath, filling my lungs with the fresh morning air, feeling a quiet sense of renewal. Each sunrise in Florence felt like a whispered secret, a fresh canvas awaiting the day's gentle strokes. The distant clip-clop of a horse's hooves, the rumble of a cart on a distant street. These were the first human sounds, signals of the city beginning to stir. Soon, the aroma of freshly baked bread would drift from a nearby bakery, warm and inviting, a promise of sustenance for the waking world. These were the simple, everyday rhythms that made up the beautiful symphony of Florentine life, and I, the humble musician, was once again ready to contribute my small, heartfelt notes. I would reach for my mandolin, its familiar weight a comfort in my hands. The wood, cool from the night air, felt smooth and alive. Tuning the strings was a meditative act, a delicate coaxing of each note until it hummed with perfect harmony. The first notes I played each morning were always soft, almost like a prayer, a gentle greeting to the rising sun, to the ancient stones, and to the quiet spirit of Florence. They were the first threads of the day's song, woven with hope and quiet gratitude. As the sun began to peek over the distant hills, casting its first golden rays across the rooftops, the piazza would slowly awaken. Pigeons would begin to coo and flutter, descending from their roosts on the cornices to peck at crumbs on the cobblestones. The first solitary figures might pass, an early riser, a priest on his way to church, a market vendor preparing their stall. They moved like shadows, their footsteps soft, their presence a quiet affirmation of the new day. My gaze would drift to the distant, hazy outline of the hills, then back to the familiar, comforting details of the piazza, the worn archways, the silent statues, the intricate ironwork of the balconies. This was my world, my stage, my sanctuary. And in this small corner of Florence, I found a profound sense of purpose. My music was a bridge, connecting the living with the echoes of the past, a gentle lullaby for the forgotten, and a hopeful melody for the future. The day stretched before me, a long, quiet canvas, waiting to be painted with the soft hues of enduring melodies. I was Marco, the street musician, and I played for the ghosts of Florence, the artisans, the lovers, the poets, the everyday souls whose lives had shaped this timeless city. Their presence was a silent, understanding audience, their whispers carried on the gentle breeze. My song was for them, and for anyone else who might find a moment of peace, a quiet connection to the beauty that endures. And as the morning light embraced the city, my mandolin began to hum its gentle, timeless tune once more, an enduring song in the heart of Florence. May your sleep be peaceful and your dreams be filled with gentle beauty. Thank you for resting with me tonight among the forgotten. Until we meet again in the quiet corners of history, good night.